I'm Dana Perino, and this is Perino on Politics. In one of his final acts, President Biden pardons his son, while President-elect Trump demonstrates his readiness for office with phone calls, meetings with world leaders, and all sorts of things. So what should we expect as we inch closer to the presidential transition on January 20th? Well, joining me now with over a decade of public and government service and someone I would describe as presidential transition expert is Luis Reyes. Lou, it's so good to have you on Perino on Politics. This is the podcast where I call up my smart friends and find out what's on their minds about the state of American politics. And this morning, as we drove in to the city from being away for the weekend, I thought, wow, I have a lot of smart friends, and you are certainly one of the smartest. Thank you so much for doing this. Lou, will you tell people just a little bit in your own words how it came to be that you know so much about transitions?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me, Dana. This is literally personally a joy for me to be on your podcast. And as you know, I'm a big fan.
Well, you know, everyone has a podcast, but I'm glad you came on mine.
But only you have your podcast.
That's true.
And no, this is, so it is really, I am, by trade a lawyer, but back in 2006, I joined the White House from the Justice Department to help lead the kind of appointments process for national security appointments. So I'd coming from a national security agency to come help President Bush find good folks to serve. And so from 2006 to 2008, I did that. Towards the end of the administration, I was then the deputy assistant to President Bush for presidential appointments and acting assistant over all the appointments. And of course, at that time, we were winding down. So to answer your question, what we were really tasked with doing was ensuring a smooth transition. And,
from Bush to Obama.
Right. So 2008 from Bush to Obama. And, some presidents, well, I can talk about what President Bush did and what he felt, which was that this was one of the most important tasks a president has.
And why did he think that?
So this is literally a matter of national security when it comes down to it. We're talking about the transition of power in the most powerful country in the world in about 90 days. From November 6th to January 20th, it all has to get done. The best and the most conscientious approach to doing that as a president is to have the handoff be as smooth as possible, starting with national security positions, but even down to best practices. We sat down with the Obama team after he was president-elect and gave him a playbook that had never been written. We kind of wrote a playbook and handed it over with the idea of, country above all else.
Okay, so let's go back a little bit. How many people in government, roughly, are appointed to their positions versus people who have full-time jobs as civil servants?
So it's a very small percentage, but it's the leadership. We're talking about 1,200 presidential appointments. Now, that number sounds high, but we're talking about millions of government employees, right? Now, in terms of the actual, now of those 1,200, there is a hierarchy. The cabinet, of course, is much smaller, and then you have sub-cabinet agencies. And then within agencies, like the Justice Department, there are presidentially appointed positions like the Deputy Attorney General, besides the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, Solicitor General, the head of the FBI, for example, also a presidential appointment, but is within a cabinet agency.
And sometimes, you just mentioned the FBI, so let's talk about that, because the FBI director, his or her term is for 10 years, right?
Correct.
So that is, the idea is that it crosses over administration so that people have confidence that it is independent from a political appointment. The FBI has been the subject of a lot of debate, and that's saying it lightly, right? I think that there's a lot of distrust in institutions. The FBI is one of those institutions that has been called into question, not necessarily because of Christopher Wray, who runs it now, but because of things that had happened before, though I'm not saying that Christopher Wray isn't also sometimes controversial to some people. You know him well. And I'm wondering about that idea that Kash Patel, who got a really great endorsement from Trey Gowdy on our air last night, but certainly a controversial figure. So tell me a little bit about that when you have somebody who is not necessarily like the Secretary of Education or the Secretary of Energy, but somebody when you're appointing to the FBI. How is that different?
Yeah, no, it's great. It's a great question. And you started at the right place, which is, this is not a position without a history, right? The history here, I mean, we're talking J. Edgar Hoover, who served for over 40 years, right? And then, during the Nixon era, there weren't limits on the director. So Congress, in its infinite wisdom, did create this 10-year term, which is supposed to create an independence. It is a unique position like no other in the government, and it really calls for someone of public trust to be truly independent across administrations. This is a position that, of course, has under its purview thousands of individuals, employees, agents out there every single day doing what they can to protect our country. And it's a leadership position. It's also a management position. I will say, you mentioned Chris Wray. I will say that, I've known Chris Wray. We served together some during the Bush administration when he was the head of the criminal division. I was in the civil division.
At the Justice Department.
At the Justice Department. He was a former federal prosecutor and is, to me, the epitome of what a public servant should be. I mean, he's doing this. He left private practice to come do the FBI job. It is a supremely tough job, and you're not going to make everyone happy in that position. But the hallmark, and this is what President Bush used to tell us, is to have people who are qualified and who understand that this is about something greater than themselves. And Chris Wray, to me, embodies that. He's not out to win a popularity contest. He's out to protect America in the way that he believes, is fit. Now, as for Kash Patel coming in, I've heard great things about him. I don't know him personally.
So will Christopher Wray have to resign, or does Trump have to fire him in order to put Kash Patel in that position?
So good question.
If he gets confirmed, but Kash Patel has to be confirmed by the Senate.
Right. So process-wise, Chris Wray still has 3 years left in his term. In order to fill that seat, he has to vacate it either voluntarily or through a termination by President Trump. So it has to, one or the other has to happen. You would hope that there would be a conversation and something smooth would happen, but until that happens, Kash cannot, or Mr. Patel cannot take the seat, or he cannot be confirmed for the position because it's not vacant. It has to be vacant first. So as a matter of national security, that seat should go vacant for as minimal amount of time as possible. There is a deputy director that, by operation of law, would assume the role as acting. And so there could be a situation where Chris Wray resigns prior to January 20th or right at around January 20th. And
gotcha.
On his own free will, and then the acting director takes the position until Mr. Patel is either confirmed or not.
Okay, so let's zoom out a little bit, because President Trump hit the ground running. Like, he won, he gave his acceptance speech, and you basically have not really heard from him since. He did one big speech at Mar-a-Lago, but he has stayed out of the Klieg lights. I think that's working for him in terms of just letting his win be carried. He has a chief of staff in Susie Wiles. She'll be the first woman chief of staff. There are appointments that you can just make, or job offers that you can make, that don't have to have Senate confirmation. So Susie Wiles as the chief of staff is an example of that. Then you have somebody like a Matt Gaetz. So he was tapped by Trump. Many members of Congress said, wait, what are you talking about? Members of the Senate balked at that. He had some support, certainly. But at some point, I think Susie Wiles and President Trump said, he clearly doesn't have the votes. Let's just rip this Band-Aid off thank him for being willing to serve, but it's not going to work out this time, and they tap Pam Bondi. So Pam Bondi is doing visits to Capitol Hill today. So what's that like when you go up to the Hill to try to say, hi, I've been tapped by President Trump, and I'm trying to earn your vote?
Right.
What do you say?
Yeah, no, and there is a whole process, and basically what you're doing is, you're pre-treating ahead of a confirmation battle. What you're really doing, there are senators that already know how they're going to vote. Mm-hmm. What you're doing up there, and you try to meet with all of them, of course, but there are senators that you may identify or may have been identified for you that are on the fence, or that need to meet with you in person, or need to hear certain things from you in order to get their
right.
vote.
So just for an example with people, let's just say it's the senator from, let's just say Colorado. I'm not pretending to be one of those members. That's just where I'm from. So come to Colorado and look, I want to take the measure of the person. I want to shake your hand. I want to look you in the eye. I'm going to know what kind of an attorney general you would be. And I also want you to know that it's very important to me that so-and-so happens, or that such and such happens, so that you can then go back to your constituents and say, I'm going to vote for her, and I made sure she understood that Colorado wants X or Y.
Bingo.
Okay.
Exactly right. And and you have to do it. It's required. All right. If you don't do it, it's seen as a snub. So
let's zoom out a little bit further then. Why did the founding fathers give this power to the United States Senate over executive branch positions?
Well, that goes to the fundamental structure of our government, which the checks and balances, the separations of powers. So the president, Article 2, has many, many powers. He has the power to appoint with advice and consent of the Senate, right? And so the advice and consent function is one that keeps a check on the presidential power. And then, from there, we have a hopefully robust process that churns out individuals that have been at least appointed by one and confirmed by another. Not impenetrable. There are other ways to get people appointed, but that is, I think, the fundamental theory and the structure of our government.
How do you think or assess from your perch the Trump transition so far?
Yeah, I think compared to last time, it's been leaps and bounds ahead. They understand the importance of having a team in place day one, and it really is a matter of national security. And with that in mind, the transition, as you said, President Trump is staying out of the Klieg lights. Mm-hmm. They pivoted from politics to governance. And the important piece is to get the folks in. Now, where I would say, you have to be careful, and there have been a few toes stubbed, is what you don't want to do is nominate folks that may have issues. If you can identify the issues before you nominate someone, it's going to serve the president much better, because otherwise you have to spend political capital on nominees that you otherwise wouldn't want to spend, and it can slow down the transition.
Right. That's a really good point, which is the spending of political capital. So President Trump has a lot of it to spend right now. Right. So he might say, all right, I know that Kash Patel is going to be controversial. I'm willing to fight for it. What do I have to do? So he's going to push on that. With Matt Gaetz, he was like, you know what? This is not going to work. And let's not spend the capital there. Let's have him go and maybe do something else. How important is it to do these background checks? Because I do feel that some people, all of a sudden, you're thrust into this spotlight, and there are background checks that you would do as part of the Trump team, right, or any president-elect team that you're looking through the background. Sometimes you miss something, or sometimes it's bad. Are you willing to talk about the example of the Bernie Kerik situation in the Bush administration?
Sure.
Let's just walk down memory lane on those hours.
Let's talk about it. So let me preface it with saying the purpose of the background check. There are two, maybe three, but two very, very good purposes. One, of course, is to make sure that there's nothing in someone's background that could compromise national security, that could compromise them, could make them be subject to blackmail and really hurt the president, right? The other part, of course, is the president should know and want to know these things before he puts his name behind someone. And it's an easy, let me just say, it is a simple decision to go ahead and do that ahead of time. The problem, of course, can be timing. If you put all the force of the presidential power behind getting these things done, and at least getting an idea, then it saves the president himself. Now, every now and then, the president will have a great idea, or his team will have a great idea, and they want someone who's already known, who is already a member of the public trust, if you will, or a member of Congress, and they won't do a background check, or they'll believe that, hey, how bad can it be? He's already been in public life for so long. And that's where sometimes you have an unforced error. In the Bush administration, there was a recommendation to President Bush to nominate Bernie Kerik of New York to be the head of Homeland Security. And that recommendation came from someone, within high up in the kind of outside the administration, but of someone that was trusted by the president. And the announcement was made before a full background was done. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, when the background was complete, there were some issues. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, Mr. Kerik pulled his own nomination. Right. And so that was an unforced error. It wouldn't have taken that long to figure out those things before announcing it. And so there you have it. Yeah, it's happened to every single president.
There's always something, right? Always. And so it depends on the president's level of tolerance for that kind of thing, right. And how much you're willing to fight for that. And I think about something a little bit different, but similar. When Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh to be a Supreme Court justice, Brett had already been background checked to death. He was on the appeals court, the Circuit Court of Appeals in D.C., and all of a sudden, from out of nowhere, are these allegations, which turns out to be completely fabricated, about his past. And the media is looking through his high school yearbook and things. And that was very difficult. And I think the last part of this segment, before we go to the next one, where we're going to talk about pardons and Hunter Biden, is how to prepare people for that kind of intrusion in their life for somebody who is willing to be a public servant. In Brett Kavanaugh's case, that's a lifetime appointment. His family's been put through the ringer, but he does succeed through that. But knowing that you're going to have to go through that gauntlet, run through that gauntlet, it's a lot. It
is so much. I couldn't agree more. I personally feel it's a travesty. He was vetted. He was very, very well vetted. Yep. And the same people that were bringing up all these allegations at that time had voted for him to be on the D.C. circuit, right?
Right.
He'd also been voted.
That's a very important point.
Right.
They didn't start to have a big problem with him until it was a Supreme Court nomination. All of a sudden, people who had already voted for him before decided, oh, wait, now we got to go look through his high school yearbook?
Yeah. And
find nothing?
Find nothing. It is so dangerous, Dana, because what you end up having is if the process is so bad, you're not going to get the best people to serve. Why would they? Right? Brett Kavanaugh had to go up there and fight for his life that afternoon, and he did it, and he got through. But it was, who wants to do that and put their family through that? I mean, his children were sitting right behind him, right? So the answer to that, and by the way, going back to backgrounds, that's another reason a president wants to have that, is they want to know even if there's a scintilla of something to prepare the candidate for, and the candidate to be ready, right? But the truth is, in that case, there wasn't even a scintilla. This is now just gets back to the idea that with immense amount of power comes immense amount of responsibility. I believe that the Democrats, in doing that, hopefully learned that first of all, it didn't work, and this goes for anyone, Democrat or Republican, and second of all, that it really sullies the process when you are literally fabricating things to take down a nominee in that person's life. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it doesn't happen again, but there's no instrument to prevent that from happening other than public outlash, mm-hmm. and hopefully the public can speak to that. But it's just a fascinating process, and the transition goes on, and we shall see. The new Congress is sworn in on
Friday, January 3rd. They're going to get right to work. There will be a lot of these confirmation hearings in those first 2 weeks of the year, so they're all preparing for that. Christmas is not going to be the same for those people this year. They'll be working. We will be right back with more Perino on Politics next. And we are back with Perino on Politics. In addition to knowing a lot about background checks and transitions, Lou, you are a great lawyer. You worked at the Justice Department. You also have political skills and instincts. And I thought we would just spend a moment with the news that we got last night that despite many public comments by President Joe Biden and then also through his spokesperson, Karine Jean-Pierre, that he would not pardon his son Hunter under any circumstances, no matter what the results were. I don't think I ever really believed that, but they kept insisting. And then all of a sudden, on the Sunday night before he leaves for a 3-day Africa trip, you find out, oh, actually, not only is he pardoned for the crimes he was accused of, he's pardoned for an 11-year period, no matter what he did. And so here we are. What do you think of it?
Yeah, it's breathtaking. I mean, I think you're right. It's not, in some ways, not surprising, but still, in light of the kind of the mantra that was laid out, pre-election, that he wouldn't pardon him. Now, legally speaking, it is the president's almost absolute power to pardon. I mean, there are a few exceptions. You can't pardon for impeachment, but Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1 lays it out of the Constitution. So he does have the power to do it. The actual implications, of course, of doing things like this is that it sets bad precedents. Now, it doesn't mean that there have been other people pardoned, on the way out. It's not uncommon. This is basically the norm in terms of even the most controversial pardons being done at the end of
Let's talk about one. And that was Bill Clinton pardoning Mark Rich on his way out the door. And who was Mark Rich's lawyer at the time that secured that? That would be Eric Holder, who became the Attorney General under Obama.
That's right.
Tell people about Mark Rich.
Yeah. Well,
Rich was the word.
Yeah, Rich was, he was very wealthy. He had a lot of access. In terms of absolutely just disregarding any kind of, there was no way to justify that other than President Clinton saying, look, I'm the president and I can do this. There was no, and by the way, what Biden attempted to do is say, well, my son was targeted because of me, right? He was actually saying that his son was targeted. But the facts are the facts, and the indictments are not made by any political person. They're made by a grand jury. So I thought it was even worse to try to explain it that way, because no one's above the law, for sure. And Mark Rich wasn't above the law either. He was prosecuted, and unfortunately, in those situations, the plenary power of the president will rule the day. It's just a matter of conscientiousness and doing the right thing, and these presidents did not do that.
And Hunter Biden will not have to pay the back taxes, the $1.4 million. I talked to a guy named, he's a former police commissioner in Baltimore, his name Daryl D'Souza, and he was charged with a similar crime in 2018 for not paying taxes on, I think he owed $67,000. Hunter Biden owed $1.4 million. This former police chief pled guilty, served 10 months, came out, and has been an outstanding citizen ever since. Great-looking guy, full of humility. Anytime I've interviewed him, he says, let me start by saying I take full responsibility for my actions and everything I did. And he's out there trying to help the community. I can't imagine that that's what Hunter Biden is going to be doing. And also, I would add this. Joe Biden allowed a lot of this behavior and maybe even encouraged it. We don't know. There could be more investigations about that. But in some ways, this helps protect Joe Biden and his brother, too. Yeah,
it is the 11-year span of this pardon has red flags all over it, right? To blanket that. Now, it is interesting, though. He's now not subject to prosecution, so he could be subpoenaed. He could have to testify.
And he can't plead the Fifth.
You can't plead the fifth. And there may be others involved that get prosecuted. I mean, investigation still may be worth it. He cannot be or won't be the target of it necessarily, but if there is a process or a system in place, even involving the president, Biden, it could be worth some investigation. But yeah, it is something that I don't think is going to end here.
Yeah. It also does just leave a really bad taste in people's mouths of saying that, if you're well connected and if your dad's rich, you're going to be taken care of, whereas other people would not. So That's unfortunate, but that is what it is, and we'll see what the fallout is. We have one more segment to come. Stand by. We'll be right back with more Perino on Politics. And we're back with the last segment of Perino on Politics, and it's a quick one. Lou, this is where I like to ask my smart friends, what are you paying attention to? Especially, it could be the transition, but it might not be when it comes to politics, or you're in private practice. Are there things that you are thinking about and looking at as we head into Christmas season?
Yeah. No, I think, in terms of what's happening in D.C., there's obviously a lot of people, some people were terribly concerned after the election, and others, it's a new day in America. For me, I like to look at this as an incredible stress test, if you will, for our president, for our system of democracy, that our system is going to meet the challenge, and as it has every time. We have a changing of power. We're going to have new people and making new decisions with the proper checks and balances from Congress. And I look forward to seeing some success for the United States and for the American people. What I like to see, what I like to see is people getting in place and starting to do the job. Right now we're in transition, and the transition is incredibly important, and it's important for national security. The United States is incredibly vulnerable during times of transitions, historically speaking.
Yeah.
Even if you look at the 9/11 attacks or even the World Trade Center bombings, they all happened within 12 months of a transition, and many other things going all the way back to Kennedy. So I'm paying attention to is, okay, the people have spoken. Let's get the people in place. Let them do their jobs. Let them rely on people that have been there for a long time. For example, the deputy director of the FBI, Abate, hopefully he remains there. He's a wealth of institutional knowledge. The point is, let's get the wheels going, protect America, and do right by the citizens. So I'm paying attention to getting things going, no matter who's in power, but to protect the United States.
And how are your girls? He has beautiful twin girls.
Great.
How old are they now?
They're 10.
Oh my gosh.
They're 10 going on 20. But yeah, they're doing great. Shout out to my beautiful girls and my...
They like to listen and watch the 5.
They do.
So,
They do.
Lou Reyes, thank you. Great to have you on the show.
It's an honor.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right, go have a good day.
Thank you.
Get back to work. All right, thank you so much. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcast Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.